To figure out how to get this app to come up and work.
Yeah, it's a brand new thing, but we appreciate you being on, man. Thank you very much.
You bet, man. Great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you too. I've been seeing you a lot on TV lately with the PFL. How's all that going? Yeah, how's it going?
It's going really well. Yeah, we just started our 5th season. The first 3 shows are here in Vegas, so I'm
Nice.
getting to be at home and work from here. It's been good.
No, it's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, and the PFL, I see you guys all kinds of great talent. Got some new signings. Got some in-house talent that you guys have developed. How do you feel about all that? How's that going?
Actually, I think it's going very, very well. This organization is exploding, getting a lot of traction. Obviously, the first 2 seasons we were on NBCSN, which is isn't really a great fit. Where it was a leftover contract from the World Series of Fighting days, and that's more NASCAR and golf than MMA. So, as soon as we moved to ESPN, I think we started getting a lot of traction very quickly. I think people like the meritocracy of the format. It's not about talking smack or pulling publicity stunts. It's about going in that cage and scoring points and winning fights. So I think they've done a great job. They just opened PFL Europe and just had our first show in Newcastle there. I think you'll see PFL Middle East, the PFL Latin America as kind of feeder programs to this PFL Global. And they're going to launch the pay-per-view model at some point as well. So I like what they're doing. They're taking care of the fighters. I mean, there'll be 6 new millionaires walk out of that arena on championship night. I think those checks got a lot of people's attention. As you know, most of the mid and lower tier fighters don't make squat. I mean, they're lucky if they make 12 and 12 per fight. You can't get enough fights in a year to sustain your family or sustain yourself with those wages. It's ridiculous. So we have a lot of room to grow in this sport in that area for sure.
Yeah, 100%. No, and as a former athlete myself, I can really appreciate that system and that way of doing things. It's just the right way, if you don't mind me saying. And Randy, before we go any further, I just want to introduce you to Jordan Myers, my co-host.
Hey,
Jordan's,
hello, sir.
Yeah, Jordan's. We're both obviously huge fans. But Jordan's a former Army veteran himself, like you.
Awesome.
And
what years were you in, man?
I joined at the very end of 2010, and then 3 years from there, so 2013. Okay. One deployment, nice. Just one contract. Deployment. Yes, sir.
Iraq or Afghanistan?
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, yeah.
And Kabul.
Kabul, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And we're also joined by Jason Floyd, our producer, in the office here too. And no, we're just really excited to have you on. Yeah, thanks, and so where do we start, man? I mean, 6-time UFC champion, 3-time All-American, multiple-time Olympic alternate, tons and tons of accolades, Hall of Fames, and so on and so forth. And I just have one question I want to start with, being a fellow athlete myself or former fellow athlete. Like, how were you able to separate the chaos of life and bring it into the cage and still perform at a high level? I know that's kind of a loaded and a difficult question, but
yeah, I mean,
off the top of your head,
a challenge, balancing. I mean, at some point I realized I'd become a master juggler. You're keeping all these balls up in the air at the same time, and I'd been doing that for a long, long time. I had a kid on the way at 19, which is what led me to the Army and a way to support a new family. And then I thought wrestling was done for me. I have family on the way. How the hell am I going to keep wrestling and keep trying to compete and make an Olympic team? Little did I know the Army was the perfect vehicle for that. And, at the peak of the Cold War in the 80s, we had 5 million soldiers stationed in Europe, and wrestling and boxing were huge sports for the services because of the combatives. And I ended up winning a couple U.S. Army Europe championships. But now I've got 2 kids by this time. My daughter was born in Germany. And so I'm juggling, trying to make the Olympic team and compete at the inter-service and the national championships and all that for wrestling, and trying to keep my family, taken care of and provide them with everything that they need. And it just turned into this juggling act. From there, I left the service. after being an alternate in '88 and went to college. And I'm a full-time college student plus wrestling full-time for Oklahoma State and trying to keep this family going. It just became a way of life. You just keep all the balls up in the air and do everything you need to do to get there. I don't know. Honestly, sometimes look back and say, I don't know how the hell I did that, but it worked out.
No, but it was just something that you did naturally. It was no like system that you adhered to or rituals that you followed, or it was just, this is how it is. And I'm a warrior, I'm a soldier. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah, thankfully. And if there's been some sacrifices and been some people that have paid, because of that commitment, because of that passion that I was chasing, it's been my family. My kids spend tons of times in gymnasiums watching me compete or sitting around, playing. Same with my wife at that time, and I had two wives, three actually that were that era when I was competing and trying to juggle all that stuff, and there's where the sacrifices were made, was with time with them and always doing the right thing in some of those relationships. So thankfully I have three amazing kids despite my, despite me, despite all that,
No.
but those divorces, I think were, you want to talk about a sense of failure and not getting the job done. That's absolutely how I feel about those, especially the first one. That was the worst. And one of the few times the thought entered my brain, like, man, I'm failed miserably and want to be done on this planet.
No, I understand. I'm recently divorced myself, and I can kind of relate to what you're saying, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And a guy like yourself, I'm sure you can explain it better. We all make mistakes at times, and even if it was or wasn't a mistake, and forgiveness is a big part of that. But being able to trudge ahead and keep moving forward the way that you did is such an exemplary thing, rather than taking the other route, the low route, of negativity.
Yeah, and again, I think working with a lot of our veterans in the veteran community, having tons of friends from that world, especially since 9/11, that have put their butts on the line and then struggled when they came back. They thought they left the front lines when they left Afghanistan or Iraq, and then they come back. They struggle. We struggle with who they are. They struggle with their purpose. They start self-medicating. They're adrenaline seeking. I can't imagine the adrenaline rush of being in a combat zone. And you can probably speak to that, Jordan, but our training can be our own worst enemy. And we're trained not to ask for help, not to show vulnerability or weakness, to stay on task and get shit done. And then the next thing you know, we're looking down the wrong end of our gun. And the statistics speak for themselves. Try to be pretty open and honest about the times I've been in that headspace. It's only been twice in my life. Thankfully, I've never struggled with depression or anxiety. I have other friends that have, and a lot of our guys come back and they're lost. They don't know who they are anymore. They don't have a purpose anymore. It sounds great, man. I can't wait to get out of the service. And then once you're out, you're like, damn, what am I going to do with myself now? I don't have the structure. I don't have the support that I had before. And I don't really know who I am. What's my next purpose? What's my next mission? Who am I going to be? How am I going to be a contributing member of society? So that's the struggle. That's the challenge in that transition. I've been very fortunate that both my transitions were, the purpose was already built in. When I left the service and walked away from that uniform, I was headed to Oklahoma State to be an All-American and national champion and get my degree. When I walked away from my fighting shorts and my gloves, acting and all the business stuff I'd already built in the 14 years I was a fighter was already in place, and I could just focus my energy on those things. And I knew who I was. I knew what I wanted to accomplish in those areas. And there was no downtime for me. There was no floundering or trying to figure out who the hell I am or where I was going next.
I see. And part of the Extreme Couture GI Foundation, you've developed that as well to help soldiers and others in that situation, correct, sir?
Exactly. In 06, I went to Iraq for 12 days. Rich Franklin and I on the ground, nice. 6 different FOBs in those 12 days, hanging out with the guys that were fighting the fight. And, you know, I took that oath at 19 and did all that training and never really had to put my butt on the line. And now since 9/11, a lot of guys actually going out there and doing the job and the things that I trained to do. So it was just an eye opener for me, being in a combat zone and hanging out with all these guys and hearing the stories and seeing how they were living. I've never been that hot in my life, and I live in Las Vegas. It was 129 degrees. It was stupid hot.
Wow.
And they're living in tents or makeshift shipping containers that, drinking as much water as they can drink, plus wearing all their gear. I mean, it was something. And then the following year in '07, I got to go to Walter Reed and Bethesda in DC. We put on a big barbecue at the Fisher House, and met a lot of the caregivers, and then got to walk the wards. It was me, Don Fry, and Ken Shamrock. And a buddy of mine, Mike Davis, set up this big barbecue, and we got to walk the wards. And I met a bunch of soldiers that had been wounded, fresh off the battlefield, and heard the horror stories. Oh, my wife's car is in the parking garage. It's got a boot on it. You can't afford to pay the $1,500 in parking fees to get the car back. And my mom lost the house because she's been down here with me for the last 2 years while I'm learning to walk again. And just a bunch of frankly BS like that really got my attention and irritated me. And so that was the impetus for me to go file for 501c3 status and create the Extreme Couture GI Foundation to help some of these guys that have been wounded in combat and are now in transition, trying to get back to being whole and contributing to our civilian life and population again. And I want to take that financial pressure off these guys. I don't want to hear those stories. Uncle Sam can't, there's too many of us. Uncle Sam can't take care of all of us. So the more of us that link arms and help each other out, and, high tide raises all ships, we got to take care of each other. You can't expect that Uncle Sam's going to do it. So, that's where that came from. And now we've added MVP to the top of that, emerging vets and players. I run the Nevada chapter out of my gym, and that's creating a place where these guys can come and work out. And then we have what we call a huddle. We sit on the mats after workout and we talk, and the demons all come out. These guys, give them a safe place where they can be vulnerable, where they can show and let all that shit out into the light of day. It doesn't like the light of day. And I guarantee you there's somebody else in the circle that's been in that spot that struggled with that exact same thing, and will tell you how they got through it. And hopefully that helps you get through it. You realize you're not alone.
I see that. That's amazing. That's really great that you're able to provide that service for the vets, and then to tag along with this too. Like, what about you mentioned it briefly too? Your own experience in transitioning from professional fighting into what you're doing now, into your businesses, into your acting career, your flourishing acting career. The transition, how and I know these transitions are never easy. But if you could explain to the audience, to us and to the audience, like, how was that for you? How was it for you?
Like I said, I feel very, very blessed and very fortunate that my new purpose was already built in that transition. So, when I ETS'd and got out of the Army, I literally drove from Fort Campbell, Kentucky in the 101st Airborne Division across into Oklahoma and rolled into Stillwater, Oklahoma to start, that same summer, that same month, as a collegiate student and athlete. I didn't have time to sit around wondering who the hell or where the hell I was going and what was going to happen. I hit the ground running, and thankfully, I had the gym, the clothing line. I'd been acting for a long time. Right. When I decided it was time at 47 to hang up the gloves and walk away from that, it was scary. Wow, gosh, I'm probably the best contract I've ever had in that last 2 years of my fight career. I fought 5 times in 18 months at the end of my career. It was the best financial contract I'd ever received from Dana White and Company. So kind of like scary to like, wow, what am I going to do now? I still have my family. I've got, my youngest going to college. I got all this other stuff going on. I still, got bills to pay and things to do. So, fortunately, things like the Expendables and a bunch of these other jobs were still there. The clothing company, the gym, all that stuff was still there. It became harder to go into the gym because there was still a big part of me that wanted to step out on that mat
Right.
and
Yeah, of
punch
course.
people in the face to get punched in the face.
Right. Yeah.
So I almost shied away from going in there just because I knew it was going to draw me in, and I was going to miss it. It's hard to go to the fights and not be wrestling in your seat, and
Yeah.
it's engaging in that, and the next thing you're wanting to go back out there and do it again. And at 47, that wasn't probably a great idea for me to do, so I needed to stay
No.
away.
Well, the thing is, I'm sure you're very well capable of doing it. I'm sure that you had, but I think what my personal opinion. I mean, you're a hero to a lot of people, and you're an exemplary model to a lot of people in regards to that. And to win a title at the age and hold the title for as long as you did, and to compete at the older age is exemplary to a lot of Americans and a lot of people in the world, and we really appreciate that about you.
Wow. Thanks, Nick. You were a part of that journey, man. You were a great workout partner for a long time.
A very small part, but the time at Extreme Couture was amazing. I mean, the athletes that have come out of that gym and what's going on there now is absolutely amazing. You have an amazing staff. I was there over Christmas. And I got a chance to run into Eric and Nate and Dennis, and what a great gym and facility that you've built there, and a great brand that you've built.
Thanks, man. We love it there, and those guys you mentioned are doing an amazing job of kind of in a lot of ways rejuvenating and rebuilding the culture that when I was competing and in there doing my camps and all that. When you were there, we had a great spot and a great place and a really, really good crew of people. That pushed each other to the limit, but at the same time, there was no ego. We took care of each other too, and it went through a big lull when I retired and walked away. A lot of guys scattered; they went to other gyms and other places, and Dennis and Robert Follis when Robert was here, and then Eric Nixick, and then my son Ryan stepping up and managing the place, and they just kind of rebuilt that culture and that family feeling and that team that was there, before, and. Guys like Misha, gals like Misha Tate, Francis Nagano, Brad Tavares. I mean, there's so many guys that are in there getting it done and chasing their passion and finding ways to accomplish their dreams. It's pretty awesome.
Absolutely, and then one of my favorite characters is Sean Strickland as well too. He's a
I saw Sean the other day.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, he's one of my favorites. Well, let's take a little bit of a turn here. So let's talk about your acting right now. Let's talk about The Expendables. What's it been like working with Sly and company and all the studs? I'm sure they're hell excited to work with you. And what's your experience been with them?
I mean, it's been amazing. Definitely one of those pinch me moments. In Expendables 1, I still remember we're shooting the first couple weeks of that film. We were shooting down in Rio de Janeiro. And there's a big palace there that we were using as a backdrop for this infiltration, in to get the bad guys. And we're all standing around this well, which was going to be our egress, our way to enter into this palace structure. And that was the first time all the Expendables came together at the same time. And on set, the buzz, having all of those people in the same space, synchronizing their watches in the scene and getting ready. I mean, it was definitely surreal. I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? This is and, a great group of guys. Everybody's like, oh man, what's it like? Is it a bunch of egos? And I'm assuming I almost said something a little more colorful than I wanted to, but everybody thought there would be drama and guys with bravado and pounding their chest and all that, but it was none of that. I think we were all honored to be part of such an ensemble cast and group of guys. We had a lot of fun sitting around in between takes, telling jokes and teasing each other, and I felt like I was back, in my locker room on the old football team before the game, getting suited up and having a blast and then going out there doing your job. It was just surreal. I remember being in Plovdiv, Bulgaria, shooting 2. And, it was so surreal. It was really cold outside. So we're in these tents, these makeshift tents, getting geared up for this big scene where the entire cast is going to go out and shoot at Jean-Claude Van Damme. And I'm standing next to Schwarzenegger and Chuck Norris, and we're all getting geared up looking at each other like, can you believe this shit? This is unbelievable.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And Expendables 4 is set to come out this year, right? Do you have the release date?
September 22nd. It'll be in the theaters. We filmed last year in London, Bulgaria again, and Greece, Thessaloniki, Greece. It was a 2.5-month shoot over in Europe, which is a long time to be in a hotel.
I bet.
But you find your way. Most hotels now have gyms, so I was getting my workouts in, and staying. That keeps me focused and keeps me moving forward. And you're working 10, 14-hour days, every single day, 5 or 6 days a week to get through that whole process. So it's a grind. Everybody thinks it's this glamorous thing, and there's nothing glamorous about it. You are grinding it out every single day. You wait for that call time. Okay, call time tomorrow at 7 a.m. So I know that I'm going to be there at least from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. and probably go longer than that. And then you also, at that same time with that call time, you get the scenes you're shooting that day. So then you're digging in, starting to memorize all your dialogue and those scenes for that day so that you're prepared to walk out in front of that camera and know your cues, know exactly what's going on and what's expected of you. And I think those are all things that come from that fighter's mentality, that wrestler's mentality, being prepared, doing the work. You don't want to walk out in the center of that cage or the center of that wrestling mat with some doubts that you've prepared yourself properly. And if you do, you're probably going to have a bad night.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true when you're walking on set, especially with a bunch of killers like those guys. I mean, there's a reason why Stallone and Bruce Willis and Schwarzenegger and so many of those guys for over 30 years have been at the top of their game, because they treat this like a profession. And you look at the dichotomy between a guy like Van Damme or a Mickey Rourke, who, let's be honest, they're great guys, but they've had some serious ups and downs in their careers because they treat it a little bit differently than guys like Stallone do. He knows exactly where his wheelhouse is. He's very smart. He knows exactly what he needs to do, to be successful in this industry. And he never took that for granted. He was very true to that profession. And I think, that's what allowed him this longevity. He's 76 going on 77 now. Some people think that Tulsa King, which is a series that's out right now, is some of his best work as an actor.
I've heard that. Yeah.
So
I've heard that. That's on Netflix. Is that Netflix, Tulsa King?
I think that's on Netflix. It might be on Amazon. I can't remember, but
okay.
I haven't got a chance to slow down long enough to watch it yet. But I'm hearing a lot of great things about it, and so those are the kind of guys you want to rub elbows with, right? If you want to be successful in this, just like we did, Nick, when we were wrestling. You wanted to see what the best guys in the sport were doing in your weight class. Those are the guys you're going to have to compete against. So I'm going to pay attention to what those guys are doing, and I'm going to try and emulate their approach, and what has allowed them success and made them successful. And being around guys like Stallone and those other big names, it's no different. I'm sitting in Video Village watching, trying to figure out how these cameras work and how, okay, you're changing lenses. Why are you changing lenses? Now you're going to slow this down or speed this up in the film speed in filming it. What does that do? Trying to sort out the stuff that goes on that is the magic. That's the magic in this industry. So
interesting. That's so fascinating. That's amazing. So just to change gears a little bit more, what's a day off like for Captain America? What do you like to do? What do you like to do for fun? Now I know you your autobiography came out some years ago, Becoming the Natural, and that's still available on all sources, I imagine. But what
I'm actually thinking about bringing that back out and trying to add a few new chapters. I mean, it's been
okay. I
wrote that back in 2005. It's been 16, 17 years, going on 18 years since I wrote that. It took me about 2 years to put that all together. Loretta Hunt was my ghostwriter and did an amazing job in 2 years of interviews to capture, the message and do it. She did an amazing job of capturing my voice and putting it in the book. And but there's been so much that's happened since then. I feel like I need to bring it out and add a couple more chapters.
Yeah,
just keep accomplishing things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you like to do for fun? What are some of the hobbies
I
that you
love to
have
ride
on
my
a day?
motorcycle.
Okay.
If I get a chance, I want the sun on my back and the wind in my face. And there's something about being on that bike. It's something I've loved since I was a kid. I had a little dirt bike as a kid, and the rest of the world goes away. It's like walking into that wrestling room. You're not thinking about your bills. You're not thinking about that argument you had with your girlfriend. You are in the moment, focused on that guy that's tying up his shoe over there that you're going to be wrestling in just a second. And the same thing is true about fighting, and training every day. That gym kind of becomes your sanctuary because the rest of the world goes away. You can't be thinking about anything else when you
Right.
have somebody staring you in the face that's trying to take you down and pin you or trying to kick you in the head. And the same is true about that motorcycle. I got it. The rest of the world goes away. I can't answer my phone. I can't be texting. I can't be doing anything else. I'm just enjoying the moment. All my worries, everything else go away.
Nice. Do you have a particular bike that you like, a particular brand, a particular model, or not to single anyone out or eliminate anyone from the conversation?
I have a Harley. I've got a
Okay,
Harley
nice.
Davidson. That's my kind of my road bike, my long distance. I've got a Road Glide. I had a
Nice.
Road King for a long time, and I put a lot of miles on that bike. I've rode it across the country 7 or 8 times through
Wow.
for different events and stuff. I traded that in on this Road Glide back in 2020, and that's kind of my long distance bike for the longer rides and stuff. And I have a chopper. When I first moved here to Vegas in '05, my buddy who was building choppers at the time, Mike Davis, was running Suicide Jack choppers, and that was kind of that Orange County choppers big craze. They had the
Yeah.
biker build off on Discovery Channel, and all that was going on at that time. And he built me a chopper, which I love. It's called the Soldier of Fortune. It's got all Army. It's got Army stuff all over it, and it's a great bike. And I will never sell that bike. That was my very first road bike, and I love that bike. So that's great for hopping around town. Not so good for any long distance rides. You'll need kidney surgery.
Well, you also sponsor a couple of biking events too, don't you? You guys have a couple of runs that you did through the Extreme Couture GI Foundation.
Yeah, the foundation. One of our early events was a motorcycle poker run here in Vegas, and like I said, this was all back '07, '08 when I founded the GI Foundation. And the bike rides. There's a strong connection between our motorcycle, this whole subculture of motorcycles, and our veteran community. After World War II, all those guys came back from the war, bought bikes, and that's when the one percenters and all the bike gangs and all this other stuff started. So, and obviously there's a lot of bike clubs and stuff that are all veteran run that don't have anything to do with the Hells Angels or any of this other stuff. They just love motorcycles. So we started a motorcycle poker run. May 20th this year is our 15th annual motorcycle poker run for the Extreme Couture GI Foundation. Last year's ride in June, it was in May, the second week in May, and it's the biggest ride we've ever had. 537 bikes showed up. It was incredible. So we're expecting, that this year might be even bigger as our 15th year doing it. So, and we're doing a ride in Seattle, a ride in Quad Cities, a ride in Florida, all for the foundation as well. So my friends have been coming to the Vegas ride forever. And like, man, I want to do one of these in my hometown. I'm like, well, if you want to organize it, buddy, knock yourself out. So we've got one, our 4th year doing it up in Seattle, our 5th year doing it in Quad Cities with Mark Pastelnik. He's a buddy of mine from, he wrestled at UNI, and him and I won Greco championships in 1990 for the first time. And we've been friends ever since, making the national team back then. And he's the one that organizes the Quad City ride up there where Militich and all those guys live. Big Tim Sylvia comes to that ride every year. It's always fun to get up there and see Tim and hang out with Tim.
Yeah.
And then the Florida ride is a new one. Another friend of mine grew up in Cocoa Beach, Florida. And last year, he's been coming to my ride here. He lives here in Vegas, but he's like, man, it'd be great to do one of these rides down in Cocoa Beach, the Space Coast and the Kennedy Space Center and all that stuff. They would love to get behind that, and help our veteran community as well. So that's a new one. We just added this last fall, and we're doing it again this fall. So.
Well, nice. Well, we'd love to have you come down to Tampa if we ever could get you down here. I know you're a busy man with a lot of irons in the fire, but we would love to have you down here if we could ever make that happen one way or another.
Man, Tampa would be very cool.
Yeah.
It's not that far actually from Cocoa Beach.
Yeah, just a couple hours. Yeah, I think, right? Yeah. No, that's fantastic, man. So, all right, so you stay busy. And motorcycles are another passion of yours, too. What about, I see sometimes you do a little, you get out and do any hunting at all? Are you a hunter, fisher?
I am an avid hunter. I've been doing that since I was 6. That was one of the few times I got to see my dad. My dad was a bit of a deadbeat. He didn't pay support. He was never really around. And he would come take me out of school for 5 or 6 days and take me hunting. And that was one of the few times I got to bond with him. So to this day, I still love to get out. I still love the woods. I love nature, and I certainly love to hunt. Deer and elk are my favorite. I've got deer and elk meat in my freezer right now.
Nice.
I'm a meat eater for sure.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I'm looking to probably do one of those myself. I've never been on an elk hunt, but I hear the meat's pretty amazing, right? It's almost like
it's incredible. Yeah, very lean. Obviously you're not getting the hormones and some of the other stuff they're putting in our other food these days, but I like it. Elk is my favorite for sure. The deer, depending on where they're at and what they're eating, they can be a little gamier, but I think that's more of an acquired taste.
I got you. Well, you've always been a spokesman and an exemplary man of fitness and exercise. What do you do now? You're 59 now. You look like you're
60. Be 60 here in June.
You look like you're 35 years old. I'm sorry. Say that again.
It's tough to walk on a set with a guy like Stallone at it's going on 77. And still ripped, and like, man, I can't roll in here with Dunlops and picking lint out of my belly button. That's just not going to fly. I do a lot of circuit training. I don't, like I said, I don't get in. I miss the grappling, honestly. I wish I could get in there and still compete grappling wise, but the neck is just worn out, and I don't want to have a neck surgery. And there's no way to do that halfway. I mean, you're either doing it or you're not doing it. And I've kind of avoided doing it just because I know I can't go halfway, and I don't want to damage the discs in the neck any more than they are, which was one of the things that led to the decision of walking away from the sport when I did. I didn't want to have a fusion. Everybody I know that's had a fusion, now they have very limited range of motion and they're still in pain. So why?
Right.
So I've just been trying to take care of the neck, but I do a lot of circuit training. I do some light sparring. I'm not getting in there and mixing it up with the pros very often. It's funny, they were doing that 4-part documentary series for the PFL in the off year because we took 2020 off. Right. Instead of trying to, frankly, half-ass the season because they spent so much time and energy building this format of a true sports format with a regular season, a championship, and a playoff every year like every other sport. And so it would have been really hard to do with all the protocols and quarantines and stuff. So they just took that year off. They created a production company and did this 4-part kind of documentary about my career, which was very flattering. And they asked me, hey, will you go in and train with the pros, go into pro practice? We'd like to get some of that on film. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. So I'm in there with the guys, warming up, sparring. First 2 rounds were pretty good. I picked smaller guys. And I felt like, I can still do this. And then the 3rd round, I end up with fucking Francis Nagano. He trained me. He freight trained double me, and I did not see the light of day for the next 4.5 minutes. It was ridiculous. So I'm like, oh man, that's going to look great on film. But it is what it is. Francis is at the top of his game, and why should he pull any punches just because it's my old ass standing in front of him?
I got you. That's awesome though that you're still mixing it up. You're almost 60 years old. You're still in there rolling with those guys, rolling with some of the. He's arguably the best in the game right now. He walked away from his UFC contract as the champion, but that's amazing, Randy. And then again, another exemplary reason why you are who you are and why everybody loves seeing you and loves talking to you.
Well, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah. Of course. So is there anything else that you'd like to talk about at all? Anything you'd like to throw out there? Any advice for young athletes, for people going through struggles, for people in general? Just anything that you have to say.
I think we're living in a very, very strange time right now. Certainly in this republic, in this country, things are a bit weird, and I think just staying focused and being true to who you are, figuring out and finding out where your passion is, what it is that you want to accomplish, and then set about chasing that with everything that you have. You know, once you figure that out, where you find where your passion is, at 10 years old, when I walked on that wrestling mat for the first time, I knew that was it. I found my calling. I found the place where I felt comfortable and where I seemed to flourish. And, you're going to do whatever it takes to get there and be successful at that once you figure that passion out and you commit to it. And I think, it's a crazy time. A lot of us are, I don't know, just scratching our head, trying to figure out where we're headed and what's going to happen here. Because I feel like something's definitely coming, and I'm not sure. I'm a little worried about it, frankly. And I never thought I'd say that. I took that oath at 19. Most of the enemies at that time were foreign. It doesn't feel like that anymore. They're not foreign. They're right here. They're living with us. They have some plans and an agenda here, it seems, and it's a bit worrisome, frankly. You saw what happened yesterday. The former president gets hemmed up over some BS that frankly seems fabricated to me. I don't know. I'm a little concerned for sure, but I got to be me. I got to be true to who I am, and entertain and defend the freedoms that we enjoy in this country that in a lot of other places they do not have. And I think we've taken a lot of that for granted. We don't see or realize. It's one of the things I loved about being in the service is it forced me to travel to a bunch of these other places. And the first thing you recognize is, man, I miss home. I miss a lot of the things that we have at home and that we take for granted. We do not appreciate.
No, I'm going to have to agree with you on that one, Randy. I mean, having traveled, just like you have, maybe not as extensively as you have, but seeing the other nations, seeing the other places in the world, Russia, Eastern Europe, these other places, these people, they live in such a destitute manner. A lot of them, the average person doesn't have the freedoms that we as Americans do. And I think that your concerns aren't unwarranted.
Well, we've meddled around and mucked around in a bunch of people's stuff around the world, and I think that's in a lot of ways put a target on our back. We've gone and done some things and screwed around in places that we shouldn't have been messing around in. We should have been just taking care of ourselves and making sure we had our ship straight and taking care of the people in this country. There's plenty of people struggling in this country, yet we're sending aid and doing all kinds of stuff in other places that a lot of which we shouldn't be doing. And, the coup in Ukraine is a perfect example of that we instigated in 2014. And that whole mess and everything that's going on over there, we're at the root of a lot of that. Whether they want to admit it or not, that's the truth. And, they want to drag us into this thing with Russia. And I don't think anybody in their right mind wants any of that. World War III doesn't need to happen. It's ridiculous.
Right.
And
right.
They're pushing to bring us in that direction, and it makes you scratch your head and wonder why, because there's an underlying cause and reason for that. They're covering their butts and trying to cover up a lot of the things that they've done over there that they shouldn't have been doing, and that's the truth. So, we're the ones that are going to pay, and we're the ones that are paying. How much of our tax money has been sent to Pakistan, sent to all these other places, when we got people here that are struggling and can't make ends meet and can't get a decent education. You start going through these systems in this country and we've got some serious problems. And I don't see any easy way to fix it, to be honest. That sounds gloomy and negative, but it's the way things seem to be going right now, and it's very, very concerning.
Well, hopefully the tides change, the tides turn, and we'll be able to work our way out of it. And, you know, when we have people like you, on the forefront out there in the public, which I think we need to see more of you out there. You know, I don't know if that's possible at all, but I think, you know, someone like you needs to be out in the public talking. And I know you already are, but, you know, I think
I walk a fine line there because, you know, I'm immersed in doing studio films and that world. And man, I got to do my best to keep my head down and my mouth shut. Or I'll get canceled just like anybody else out there. So, you know, I can't express how I feel or really state what I see is going on without getting myself into a rhubarb and bigger issues. So I do my best to keep my mouth shut and you know, not pick fights and you know, not step up and say the things I really want to say about what's going on. And because I want to continue to work and I want to continue to be able to take care of my family and flourish. And I know that you go against the narrative or you step up and try and fight what's going on, you end up in, you know, they hold a lot of the cards, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And they don't leave you much, if any, options.
Right. Well, I just want to say on behalf of us, we really appreciate you. We're really honored to have you on the show, Jordan and Jason and I, and I hope that I'm sure that a lot of people will tune in to see this and to hear your message, and it would be great. It was just great talking to you, great having a wonderful conversation with you.
It's great to see you, Nick. I'm glad you're doing well. This is really cool. I'm glad you guys are doing this podcast, and I hope it continues to flourish and do well for you guys.
Thank you, Randy. We really appreciate you, man. And then one of these days, you know, we'd love to get you out here to Tampa if that's possible. We'll take you fishing. We'll take you to a Bucks game or a Lightning game or a Rays game or some of the other minor league teams that are out here. We'd love to take care of you, man. We'd love to have you out.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you. I think I'm getting to go fishing down in at Fort Walton in June with Clay Guida. Clay Guida's got a show called Grills and Thrills, and he tried to get me to go out last year, and I couldn't fit it in the schedule. But it looks like I'm going to be able to fish for a few days with him this year in early June. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's right. Yeah. I actually ran into Clay. He comes to Tampa every now and again too, and I ran into him briefly. That's awesome. That's great that you're able to see him. Well, we'd love to do the same too. We'd love to have you down here. Maybe, you know, we'll figure it out in the next few weeks or next few months or so when you have some free time, which I know you don't have very much of.
It's all good, man. I like staying busy. Yeah. It's a good place to be for sure.
All right. Yeah, it was wonderful, man. We'll
I've been a little starstruck, I'll be honest. I don't. If I could ask,
Randy Couture.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Like one of my favorite scenes of like all time was from a Big Stan when they're like on the bleachers. I don't know, with the money laundering. Dude, I've said that, I've repeated that scene so many times, and like I don't know.
I read that script. You know, they offered me the role, and they said, "Hey, this is, you know, it's not a big role," and I said, "Well, send me the script. I'll read it." And I read that script, and it made me laugh out loud.
Yeah,
I have got to play this character.
Yeah,
that was my first time working with Bruce Willis and first time working with 50 Cent. Obviously, Expendables 4, 50 has a big role in Expendables 4. And he's a great guy, actually. Very smart man. He has very, very special charisma. I see. You know, I've worked with him a few times now, and but yeah, that was a fun one. Petey's demise.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. You know, it's been an honor. You know. Like I said, I've been a little starstruck, but I've just been, thanks for sharing. And I also wanted to thank you, among everything else you do. I think the huddle that you referred to, you let, you know, vets be vulnerable and able to speak, because like you said, a lot of people, you know, they teach and they're taught to just, you know, drive on, you know, everything's going to be fine, don't need any help. And you don't want to be weak or vulnerable, you know, and it takes a special environment to draw that out in people where it is safe, like you talked about. And I think that's a phenomenal thing you've done for some people. So
yeah,
I appreciate that.
We have to change that narrative. You know, showing 100%. Vulnerability or asking for help is not weakness. That is actual courage and stepping up and being willing to, you know, to go against that narrative and ask for help. If you're struggling, there's a lot of people out there that want to help, that want to get behind you and help you get through those dark periods and that dark stuff, and let all that stuff out into the light of the day. It doesn't like that at all. So,
No.
yeah, it's important. I think, I got to speak last year to all the sergeant majors in the European theater. There was probably about 75,
Oh, wow.
career counselors, sergeant majors. And, again, it's, trickle down, start at the top. If we can change that narrative with the sergeant majors in the Army, and had one of those sergeant majors stand up and tell his story. Strat Plessis, Command Sergeant Major of the Army, stands up and tells his story of having his pistol in his mouth, and pretty poignant, tough to refute.
Yeah.
One of those guys stands up and says, "Yeah, this is where I was at. I've been deployed and done a lot of things as a ranger and everything else that I'm struggling with and I need help with." And he ended up getting the help he needed, but he was honest and had the balls, frankly, to stand up in front of everybody and tell that story. And I think that's where it starts. Guys like him that are willing to say, "Hey, look, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to show that vulnerability. We've got resources, we've got places and people that want to help out." It's got to start somewhere. So
absolutely,
we've got to start talking about it.
I completely agree. And again, thank you for doing what you're doing. It needs to be done. And yeah, I don't know. It's a tough subject to approach. It's no fun, but it needs to be brought out, like you said, and it doesn't like the light. So,
no. Awesome, man. You guys have a great day.
You too, Randy. Thank you very much. We'll be in touch. All right.
Thanks so much.
You bet,
Thank you again.
You guys be well.
You too. Bye-bye.